You already know you care too much about what people think. That isn't the part that confuses you. The confusing part is that no matter how many times you tell yourself to stop, one opinion can still change your entire day. One careless comment can make you question yourself. One look of disapproval can stay in your mind for hours. Deep down, you've probably wondered why other people seem able to move on so easily, while you keep carrying the weight of what someone else thought about you. The answer is probably not what you've been told. What makes it even more frustrating is that you already know it shouldn't matter this much. You've read the advice. You've told yourself to be more confident. You've tried to ignore people's opinions. But when someone criticizes you, excludes you, or seems disappointed in you, your mind immediately starts searching for what you did wrong. You replay the conversation. You wonder if you should have said something different. You convince yourself that everyone else has already moved on, yet somehow you're still carrying the moment with you. That cycle is exhausting, and after a while you begin believing there's something wrong with you. The problem isn't that you care too much. The problem is that you've been taught to believe other people's opinions reveal your worth. From a young age, approval was treated like proof that you were doing something right, while criticism felt like proof that something was wrong with you. Without realizing it, you stopped treating other people's opinions as information and started treating them as evidence. Once that happens, every judgment begins to feel personal, even when it has very little to do with who you really are. Think about how often you've changed your mood because of someone else's reaction. You were feeling fine until they ignored your message. You were confident until they questioned your decision. You were excited until someone laughed at your idea. Nothing about you actually changed in those moments. The only thing that changed was someone else's opinion. Yet somehow, they gained the power to decide how you felt about yourself. The real question isn't why they have that power. It's why you handed it to them without ever realizing it. Most people assume freedom comes from making everyone like you. In reality, that only creates another prison. The more your peace depends on being accepted, understood, or approved of, the more control you quietly give away. You begin adjusting your words, your decisions, even your personality, not because they reflect who you are, but because you're trying to avoid someone else's disapproval. It feels like you're protecting yourself, when in fact you're slowly handing other people control over your emotional state. The difficult part is that this habit rarely begins in adulthood. It starts much earlier. You learn that praise means safety and criticism means danger. Over time, your mind becomes trained to constantly scan for signs of acceptance or rejection. Long after you've grown up, that pattern keeps running in the background. You don't even notice it anymore. You simply assume it's normal to let other people's reactions decide whether you should feel confident or uncertain. That's why breaking free isn't just about changing your mindset. It's about recognizing a pattern you've been living inside for years. This is why some people can criticize you without ever questioning themselves. They aren't necessarily wiser or stronger than you. They've simply stopped treating every opinion as a verdict on who they are. They understand something most people never do. An opinion is not the same as the truth. Someone can misunderstand you, dislike you, underestimate you, or judge you unfairly, and none of those things automatically become reality. The moment you stop confusing opinions with facts is the moment you begin taking your power back. But if that sounds so obvious, why is it so difficult to live by? Because your mind isn't really afraid of other people's opinions. It's afraid of what those opinions might cost you. Being rejected, being excluded, being misunderstood, being seen as not good enough. The fear has never been about criticism itself. The fear is losing connection, acceptance, or belonging. Once you understand that, you stop fighting the symptom and begin seeing the real problem hiding underneath it. This is where many people make the mistake of trying to become emotionally numb. They believe the answer is to stop caring completely. But that isn't emotional independence. It's emotional avoidance. Real power isn't pretending that criticism doesn't exist. It's reaching a point where someone else's opinion no longer decides how you see yourself. You can listen without surrendering. You can consider without obeying. You can be open to feedback without making another person the author of your identity. Ask yourself something. How many decisions have you made simply to avoid being judged? Maybe you stayed quiet when you wanted to speak. Maybe you agreed when you wanted to say no. Maybe you chose a career, a relationship, or even a version of yourself because you believed it would earn approval. At the time, each decision felt small, but over the years, those small compromises begin to shape a life that feels strangely unfamiliar. You wake up one day realizing you've spent more time protecting other people's opinions than protecting your own peace. The truth is, people who constantly seek approval are often easier to influence than they realize. The moment someone discovers that your peace depends on being liked, they don't need to force you to do anything. They simply have to offer approval or threaten to take it away. Without noticing, you begin changing your behavior to keep their opinion of you intact. What feels like kindness or cooperation can slowly become emotional dependence, and emotional dependence is one of the easiest forms of control. The strange part is that the people who hold the strongest opinions about you usually know the least about you. They see one moment, one decision, one version of you, and believe they've understood your entire character. Yet you give those opinions more weight than your own years of experience living your life. Somewhere along the way, you began trusting the judgment of strangers, colleagues, friends, or relatives more than your own understanding of who you are. That isn't humility. It's a habit you've never been taught to question. Imagine carrying a mirror everywhere you go, except the mirror never belongs to you. Every person you meet gets to hold it for a moment. Some tell you you're impressive, others tell you you're disappointing. A few barely notice you at all. If you keep looking into their mirror to decide who you are, your identity will change every time the person holding it changes. That is exactly what happens when you build your self-worth on other people's opinions. Your identity becomes unstable because you've placed it in hands that were never meant to carry it. Once you see this pattern, another question appears. If other people's opinions aren't defining your worth, then what should? Most people have never answered that question for themselves. They've spent years collecting approval without ever building an internal standard. That's why one compliment can make them feel valuable, and one criticism can make them feel broken. When your standards come from outside you, your confidence will always rise and fall with whoever happens to be watching. Real power begins the moment you stop asking, "What do they think about me?" and start asking, "What do I know to be true about myself?" Those two questions sound similar, but they lead to completely different lives. The first keeps your attention trapped in other people's minds where you'll never have control. The second brings your attention back to the only place where real control has ever existed. That shift feels small at first, but it quietly changes every decision you make. If what we've talked about so far feels uncomfortably familiar, then you're exactly the kind of person I wrote my free ebook for. It's called The Art of Strategic Indifference, and it explores these ideas in much greater depth, showing you how to stop giving away your emotional power and begin thinking more independently. It's completely free and only available for viewers of this channel. If you'd like to continue this journey, you'll find the link in the description. That doesn't mean you stop listening to people. It means you become far more selective about whose opinions deserve space in your mind. Most opinions are reactions shaped by someone else's fears, beliefs, experiences, and limitations. They tell you far more about the person speaking than the person being judged. Once you understand that, you stop collecting every opinion as if it were a piece of your identity. Instead, you begin asking a different question. Has this person actually earned the right to influence how I see myself? There will always be someone who misunderstands you, someone who judges you after seeing only a small part of your life, someone who dislikes you for reasons they don't even fully understand themselves. If your goal is to eliminate every negative opinion, you'll spend your entire life chasing something that has never been possible. The people who appear most confident are not free because everyone approves of them. They're free because they've accepted that approval was never something they could control in the first place. The moment you stop trying to control other people's opinions, something unexpected happens. You stop giving them so much attention. Instead of wondering whether they approve of your choices, you begin asking whether your choices are aligned with the person you're trying to become. That shift changes everything. Your decisions become guided by principles instead of reactions. You stop chasing temporary approval and start building something far more stable, a life that still works, even when nobody applauds it. You may have noticed that the people who are hardest to manipulate rarely spend much time explaining themselves. They understand that every explanation given only to gain approval gives another person the chance to become the judge. They don't refuse to explain because they are arrogant. They refuse because they know their self-worth is not something that has to be negotiated. The less your identity depends on convincing other people, the more peaceful your mind becomes. There is another reason you care so much about what people think, and it is rarely talked about. You have been trying to predict your future by studying other people's reactions. If they approve, you feel safe. If they disapprove, you begin expecting failure, rejection, or regret. Without realizing it, you've allowed other people's opinions to become predictions about your life. But someone else's reaction has never been a reliable forecast of your future. It's only a reflection of what they can or cannot see in this moment. Think about the people whose opinions still affect you the most. Chances are it isn't everyone. It's usually the people you've quietly given authority over your identity. A parent, a partner, a friend, a manager, someone whose approval came to mean more than your own judgment. The problem was never that they had opinions. The problem was that you slowly promoted them into a position they were never meant to hold. You made them responsible for confirming your value. And that's a responsibility no one can carry without eventually disappointing you. Taking your power back doesn't begin when people stop judging you. It begins when you stop treating their judgment as permission to trust yourself. There will always be opinions you cannot change. There will always be misunderstandings you cannot correct. But the moment you stop asking the world for permission to be who you are, you become far more difficult to control. The opinions around you may never become quieter, but they will slowly lose the ability to shape the voice inside your own mind. From that point on, criticism begins to serve a different purpose. Instead of becoming something that defines you, it becomes something you evaluate. Some criticism will be useful because it helps you grow. Some will be unfair because it comes from misunderstanding, insecurity, or projection. Emotional independence is knowing the difference. You no longer reject every opinion, and you no longer absorb every opinion. You learn to examine them without allowing them to decide who you are. There is a quiet confidence that most people never develop because they spend their entire lives waiting for other people to confirm it first. They believe confidence is something you earn after enough praise, enough success, or enough approval. But confidence built on approval is always temporary because it disappears the moment approval does. Real confidence grows differently. It comes from repeatedly acting according to your own principles. Even when someone disagrees, even when someone misunderstands you, and even when nobody notices. That is why truly confident people appear so calm. Their confidence is no longer being rented from the opinions of others. The people who influence you the most are rarely the loudest. They are the ones whose opinions you've decided carry the greatest weight. That decision often happens so gradually that you never notice it. You begin giving one person's approval more importance than your own judgment. Then another. Before long, your emotional state becomes a reflection of how those people respond to you. The unsettling truth is that nobody can take your emotional power without your permission. Most of the time it isn't stolen. It's surrendered a little at a time until it feels normal. One of the clearest signs that you're beginning to take your power back is that you stop feeling the need to defend every decision you make. In the past, you probably believed that if people understood your reasons, they would finally approve of your choices. But experience teaches something different. Some people have already decided how they see you before you ever speak. No explanation will change that. When you realize this, you stop wasting your energy trying to control other people's conclusions and start investing that energy into living according to your own convictions. There is a question that quietly changes everything once you begin asking it. Instead of wondering, do they approve of me? Ask yourself, would I respect the person I become if I spent my life chasing their approval? For most people, the answer is uncomfortable. Every time you betray your values to avoid criticism, you lose a small amount of trust in yourself. That loss is far more damaging than someone else's opinion could ever be. The respect you're searching for from the outside can never replace the respect you lose within yourself when you abandon your own principles. You don't become emotionally independent by convincing yourself that other people's opinions never matter. You become emotionally independent when they stop having the final say over how you see yourself. There is an important difference. You can still listen. You can still reflect. You can still learn from criticism when it is honest and useful, but you no longer hand someone else the authority to define your value. Their opinion becomes one piece of information, not the foundation of your identity. That single shift is what separates a person who is emotionally controlled from someone who is emotionally free. The people who seem impossible to shake are not protected from criticism. They hear it just like everyone else. The difference is that they have already decided whose voice carries authority in their life. They measure themselves against their own standards before they measure themselves against anyone else's expectations. Because of that, criticism becomes something they evaluate instead of something they absorb. They don't feel the need to fight every opinion or win every argument because their identity was never built on public agreement. It was built quietly, through repeated decisions that remained true to who they chose to become. If you want to know whether you've truly started taking your power back, pay attention to what happens after someone disagrees with you. Do you immediately begin questioning yourself, searching for mistakes, and trying to repair their opinion of you? Or do you calmly consider whether their perspective contains something useful before deciding what deserves your attention? That small moment reveals more than you might think. It shows whether your self-worth still depends on external approval or whether it has finally begun to grow from something far more stable. That quiet shift is where emotional freedom really begins. The irony is that the more you stop chasing approval, the more authentic your relationships become. People no longer meet a version of you that has been carefully adjusted to avoid rejection. They meet the real person. Some will like that person, some won't. But for the first time, their opinion is based on who you actually are, rather than who you believed you had to become to earn acceptance. That may reduce the number of people who approve of you, but it dramatically increases the number of people who genuinely respect you. Eventually, you reach a point where you realize the goal was never to make people think well of you. That goal can never truly be achieved because every person sees the world through their own experiences, beliefs, fears, and expectations. The real goal is to become someone whose peace no longer depends on those changing opinions. When you stop trying to manage how every person perceives you, you recover an incredible amount of mental energy. That energy can finally be invested where it has always belonged, building your character instead of protecting your image. The people who have the greatest influence over their own lives are not the people who receive the most approval. They are the people who have learned to separate their identity from other people's reactions. They understand that praise can be just as dangerous as criticism if it becomes the foundation of their self-worth. Both can quietly place their emotional state into someone else's hands. Real freedom begins when compliments no longer make you feel complete, and criticism no longer makes you feel broken. You appreciate both without becoming dependent on either, because your sense of self no longer belongs to the crowd. So the next time you catch yourself worrying about what someone thinks of you, don't ask whether their opinion is positive or negative. Ask yourself something far more important. Have I allowed this person to become the judge of my identity without realizing it? That single question changes the conversation happening inside your mind. Instead of chasing another person's approval, you begin reclaiming ownership of your own perception. And the moment you stop asking the world to tell you who you are, is the moment the world begins losing its power to decide how you feel. You may never completely stop caring about what people think, and that isn't the goal. The goal is far more powerful than that. It is to reach a point where your decisions are guided by your principles instead of your fear of rejection, where your confidence comes from keeping promises to yourself instead of collecting approval from other people, where your peace is no longer something the world can give or take away with a single opinion. Because the greatest form of power is not controlling how people see you. It is refusing to let their perception control how you see yourself. You cannot control the opinions people form about you. You never could. But you can decide whether those opinions become the foundation of your identity or simply another passing voice in a world full of them. The day you stop measuring your worth through someone else's approval is the day you stop living according to someone else's expectations. That is when you begin thinking more clearly, acting more deliberately, and standing more firmly in who you are. And once your peace no longer depends on the changing opinions of others, taking your power back is no longer something you hope to do. It becomes the way you live. If there's one idea to take away from this video, it's that your greatest freedom begins when other people's opinions stop deciding how you see yourself. If you'd like to explore this philosophy more deeply, my free ebook, The Art of Strategic Indifference, was written as the next step for viewers who want to build emotional independence from the inside out. It's completely free, and you'll find it in the description. I'm also curious to know, when did you first realize you were giving too much power to other people's opinions? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you genuinely found value in today's video, I'd appreciate you leaving a like. If you're interested in learning more about emotional independence, strategic thinking, human nature, power dynamics, discipline, and self-mastery, consider subscribing. The next recommended video continues this philosophy and builds on what we've explored today, so I encourage you to keep watching. And if you're someone who wants to go even deeper, you'll also find my Patreon linked in the description. That's where I share my most in-depth ideas, observations, and psychological breakdowns that aren't structured for public platforms. Think of it as a private place for people who are serious about understanding themselves, understanding others, and mastering these principles on a much deeper level. Both the free ebook and Patreon are waiting for you in the description.